Assalamu alaikum, this is Brother Hameed back again with the Muslim Empowerment Institute. Today I want to discuss something that is very important to the fabric of the Black American Muslim community, and it's the family. And let me say this, if we're not building healthy families, then we're not building healthy communities. And if we're not building healthy communities, then the future of Islam and Black America is in jeopardy. In America, marital rates have declined significantly within the last 50 years. Marriage seems like an institution that's no longer valued in America, and this mindset is affecting both blacks and whites. Other groups like Hispanics and immigrants haven't yet got acclimated to this secularistic individualism that we have in America yet, but it's soon coming to them. In 1960, roughly 61% of blacks were married, but now as of the last U.S. Census, it's about 29%. Now the question is, why aren't people getting married these days? Specifically, why aren't black people getting married these days? Well, first, intercourse outside of marriage has been destigmatized. It's become the norm. Once upon a time, people got married and then they had children. Now the norm is having children and never getting married. Once upon a time when people got married, maybe the mother was a stay-at-home wife, or maybe she worked. The father worked outside the home, and they pooled their resources to raise their children, and they even had community support from the neighbor down the street. But now it's normal for women to have children out of wedlock, especially in the black community, whereas over 70% of black children are born out of wedlock. And in the 1965 Moynihan report entitled The Negro Family, The Case for National Action, the author documents that at that time that a quarter of black children were born out of wedlock. The author stated that this high percentage of out of wedlock births was a cause for deep concern, and he emphasized the urgency for immediate action. Now look what we got. 50-some years later, over 70% out of wedlock. And statistics show that children that are reared out of wedlock have higher rates of drug abuse, incarceration, school dropouts, and mental health issues. And not to mention, poverty rates go through the roof for single mothers. However, poverty rates are cut in half when you marry. Perhaps some of these are contributing factors to many of the social ills that we experience as black people in America. Maybe. Now, historically, marriage always gave the married couple better outcomes in terms of health as well as socially speaking. Now, when you turn on the television and watch programming targeting black audiences, you have sitcoms and films about the single mothers club and living single, and just all these single black women who are living it up with their professional careers, just going from guy to guy, or just living their best life alone and bitter. Now, some analysts have surmised that black women put little value on marriage based on the high number of out-of-wedlock births and the notion of their general aversion towards marriage, but this is not the case per se. Due to many of the social deprivations within the black community, black women are not getting married because a large percentage of black men are unemployed and mass incarcerated, which contributes to that unemployment, as well as black men being murdered at an alarming rate. Plus, if you add interracial unions and homosexuality, it's slim pickings for black women. Meanwhile, even though media and popular culture are trying to program black women to marry white men, and you can see this a lot in the commercial advertisements, and folks like Oprah and the rest of them are trying their best to vilify black men with every breath of their bodies. Despite all of this, black women still prefer black men over other races in general. There just aren't enough black men with means to go around for black women. Hence a decline in marriage in our community. Now, according to a 2010 Pew Research study, they found black women have high standards pertaining to whom they marry. Now, I didn't say they have high standards pertaining to whom they choose to reproduce with. That's another story. But they asked how important it is that a good husband is one that has a decent income. And 2/3 said it's very important, compared to 32% of white women. Roughly 55% of black women said it was very important for a husband or a partner to be well educated compared to only 28% of white women. Half of black women said that financial stability should be an important precondition for marriage. But only a quarter of white women felt that way. Now, this is shocking due to the fact that white women had considerably lower standards and expectations for mates, even though it's more white men out there with means. Now let's get to the Black American Muslim community and how they're affected by all of this. Once upon a time, maybe in a typical northeastern Black American Muslim community, Islamic marriages and divorces would take place quite often. And this phenomenon has slowed down a bit among Black American Sunni Muslims. A lot of the imams and masjid administrations at predominantly black masjids started to prioritize premarital counseling and different seminars and workshops on marriage. But what we're seeing is that Black American Muslims are being affected by all of the stuff that's going on in the dominant society that would prevent and demean the institution of marriage. Zina or fornication is becoming the preferred relationship scenario instead of marriage, as I mentioned earlier. And yes, this is impacting Muslims as well. Now get this, zina is facilitated by Muslims when we complicate and erect so many barriers to marriage. This is true. So people don't marry, but they still desire intercourse. Now what's happened is that a lot of Black American Muslim women have blown the whistle, so to speak, loudly I would say, pertaining to avoiding marriage with certain Black Muslim men whom they would deem unfit for marriage. But it just comes off as you women just got unrealistically high expectations and you want someone to come up with all this money and these provisions, but you're not willing to give anything back in return. So it just seems like a one-sided business arrangement. And you know, men are hearing this type of rhetoric from these women thinking that these sisters just want a benefactor and they're just looking for, a come up, and their standards are just unrealistic. And then you have this misery loves company thing going on. You have a lot of women out there who have been around the block a bit with marriage, maybe had some bad situations, maybe made some bad choices that created those bad situations, and the advice that they give other sisters pertaining to marriage is always negative. When in reality, she doesn't want anyone to get married before her. She tells a sister who's never had a bad experience with marriage or never even been married before all this negative stuff to try to dissuade her towards marriage. Meanwhile, she may be spending time with Tyrone, who's not even a Muslim, or she just hates men altogether. So she'll project that hatred that she has for men on unsuspecting sisters. So that one bad man that she encountered, that she chose, is equivalent to every black man on the planet. And Oprah is helping push this idea too. She's like a Muslim version of Oprah, but broke. And another reason why we're seeing a marital decline is that we don't really help each other get married. You just find a mate on your own and you make a ton of mistakes in the process. But if you wind up with a non-Muslim, we'll talk bad about you. We should never demean anyone for what they're doing if we don't have a replacement for them. This is why you shouldn't get on people for their bad diets, for their lack of low-paying jobs or their lack thereof, where they live or whatever, unless you have a replacement for them. Now, how many black Muslim fathers are out there actively helping their daughters get married or their sons get married or even training up their children to be good mates? But when they come home with a non-Muslim, you all upset. Now, according to the last U.S. Census, 42% of black men have no children. So 58% of black men with children are either married, taking care of their children, or single fathers taking care of their children, or not taking care of their children at all. Now, I would say that the majority of these men with children are doing what they're supposed to do and taking care of their families, and the extreme minority are what you would call deadbeats. But popular culture likes to tell you otherwise, even though the data doesn't support it. So this whole myth that all these black men are just breeders spreading their seed around is grossly exaggerated. For real. We're talking about 42% of black men don't even have any children. 42%. And there are nearly 2 million more black women than black men, according to a NBC Nightline report, and close to 1 million incarcerated. So it's a situation where you have 5 bulls impregnating 100 cows, but the rest of the bulls ain't impregnating anybody. But yet 5 bad bulls are equivalent to all the bulls on the face of the earth. So some women have bought into this and just have a negative viewpoint on black men, and in turn have a negative viewpoint on marriage. And another thing that increases their negative viewpoint of marriage is, especially for a lot of young black Muslims, is how they were raised. You know, so if you grew up in a situation where you were impoverished while your parents were married, and your mom was a stay-at-home wife and your dad was sitting in the masjid all day waiting on the day of judgment to come, then of course the sister don't want to get married. Dad could have been out there working, yet he says he's working for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a lot of this goes on, and the children, especially the daughters, end up having a bad taste in their mouths for marriage. And for some of these young women who grew up and go to college, they vow to make something out of themselves. And they may just be focused on their careers, and they may deprioritize marriage until, of course, their biological clock starts to tick, and then they just end up having a baby with anybody. And then they try to remarry and make a new guy responsible for their mess. And then when these women go to college, they have all of these opportunities for them. And it's just that college atmosphere of individuality and freedom. And then they take a gender studies class and start talking this nonsense about Prophet Ibrahim being a deadbeat for leaving Hajar in the desert with no food, and how patriarchy is so evil and it needs to be dismantled. Then you can forget about her ever getting married. Real talk. So brothers and sisters, if Islam is going to continue within the black American community, it's not going to continue without people getting married and building healthy families. Straight up. Black Muslim men, whoever this applies to, some of you need to stop spending so much time in the masjid, and you need to spend some time working on your skills so you can get a good job and working on your business plan. This is a part of Islam too. You're not gonna make yourself marketable as a husband, and you're not gonna change the minds of these negative sisters if you don't have a decent job to take care of a family. Simple as that. Going to marry these women from overseas is not a solution. It's just not. That's probably the last thing in the world that a non-black Muslim will want to do, is marry a black person. They don't want to destroy their lineage and their heritage by marrying you, and no, that doesn't make them racist. If an immigrant does want to marry you, sometimes it's because they have some ulterior motive, or they just want to rebel against their parents and hurt their feelings. And here you go, just a pawn in someone else's scheme. Or if their parents are acting like they're okay with you marrying her, it's because they know something about her and her past that you don't know. So they may say that since their little Arab princess or African princess has been around the block a bit, so to speak, during her Jahiliyyah period, then no one from back home will want to marry her. So we'll just let this black dude with an inferiority complex marry her, or they'll just, try to get a green card from you. It is what it is. And also, black Muslim men, feminism and women empowerment is a global phenomenon. The era of these docile, submissive women that you read about in books or hadith or whatever is probably over and not coming back. Submissive women exist in patriarchal environments, not matriarchal environments like black America, with few exceptions. Sometimes it's not about the woman, it's the environment that she grew up in. And this environment in America says that men are useless, especially black men. So brothers just gotta find a sister who believes otherwise if you can. Now, black Muslim women, whoever this applies to, if you want 100% from a brother, consider that he may want 100% from you. It's really strange when you have Muslimas who've been around the block a bit, with all these kids, making all these demands and telling a brother what she ain't gonna put up with. And then telling him that his kids from a previous situation don't need to be coming over to their home and stuff like this. She's looking for someone to fulfill those voids and solve those problems that were created before the man even came along. And then you got those women, they're so independent that don't need a man and they all by themselves. And that's what independence means, all by yourself. And that's how it's going to be for the most of them. You can't be corrected. You can't be guided. You don't want to be submissive. Just pay my bills and don't dare ask me to do anything. Now, let me say this. If you don't have nothing to offer a man but a headache, and all you want to do is take from him and don't have anything to add value to his life and his deen, then I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you single and bitter for all the rest of your days. No one is going to pay new car money for a jalopy that's been in a whole bunch of accidents. And if someone does, he deserves for that beat up car to keep breaking down on him over and over again until he gets a new one. Real talk. Brothers and sisters, we gotta fix our broken families. It's important. But a family can be broken if it never was put together in the first place. We can't be afraid of each other and be afraid to get married because we're afraid of failure or some negative consequence. As Imam Luqman Ahmed said, who was a grassroots imam in the trenches in our communities, he said, lifelong partnerships to one person is not cited in the Quran and Sunnah as a civilizational virtue, but marriage over fornication is. Fornication is widespread and we gotta avoid it. We must work together. In 2053, black wealth is projected to be at zero, and we're gonna have a lot of black women looking for someone to help them pay their bills, and in turn, you're gonna have a lot of black men trying to avoid them like the plague. We gotta work together and build relationships based on reciprocity. Allah doesn't change the condition of people until they change what is within themselves. So if we change our condition on the inside, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would change our condition on the outside. Finally, February 22nd is the Black Dawah Network's first annual day of Dawah. We intend to meet our brothers and sisters where they are and not where we want them to be. We'll be in the streets in inner cities like Chicago, Atlanta, Memphis, Houston, Omaha, Norfolk, Boston, and just recently added Montgomery, Alabama, hosting Islamic outreach. Inshallah, we intend to hand out free translations of the Quran along with the autobiography of Malcolm X to our brothers and sisters in the most marginalized societies in America. We intend to tell them how Islam brought Malcolm X out of darkness into the light. And we'll tell them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only deity worthy of worship, and that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final prophet and messenger. We'll talk to them about their day-to-day realities, and we'll tell them how Islam has the solution for the problem of black suffering. So check us out if you're in any of these cities, and reach out if you want to host an event. Now, one last thing, the Muslim Empowerment Institute and the Black Dawah Network is intent on the revival of Islam in the Black American community with the dissemination of an expression of Islam that speaks on our day-to-day realities. And Islam that's non-sectarian, without all the man-made labels that emerged after the time of Prophet Muhammad and his companions. We're not calling to some sheikhs from overseas, and we're definitely not trying to turn people into Toby Muhammad. We're calling our people to the best version of themselves and to exemplify the best of the culture that we grew up in America. I know some brothers may still be in their Toby Muhammad phase, and we just wanted to clear the air for informational purposes. Check out the book From the Back of the Bus to the Back of the Camel, Analyzing the Psychology of Toby Muhammad, at MuslimEmpowermentInstitute.org, and of course check us out at the Black Dawah Network. Check out the Netflix documentary on who killed Malcolm X if you haven't seen it already. Imam Amin Athari, the founder of the Muslim Empowerment Institute, is appearing in it. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.